What's up guys, Mr. Bazy here, and today we're going to talk about the possible implementations of non-lethal grenades in Halo 5 Guardians. Now before I get started, I want to make sure that it's very clear that this is no way confirmed in Halo 5 Guardians that there's going to be non-lethal grenades, but I was theorizing about maybe is there really a place for non-lethal grenades in Halo 5 Guardians. We've seen non-lethal implementations, things like shield drain and radar or whatever it is, the pulse grenade or the radar ping from Halo 3, objects that you could throw out and do damage to your opponent. Now those two things right there are going to play huge into my idea of these things. Now all of these grenades, before I get started, have weaknesses. They're all very weak in terms of their implementation as a non-lethal grenade, and they all have their counters in terms of armor, in terms of the theories that I've thought about. Now, the very first one I want to talk about is the radar grenade. It's like a radar ping grenade or something like that. Pulse grenade, I suppose it would be called. Where, again, very similar to the radar thing in Halo 3, that little ball that you would throw out. Actually, no, that was a radar scrambler, actually. So this is actually a slightly bit different implementation. So essentially, you would throw this grenade. This grenade does bounce, so you could bank it off of walls and really get it into the places you need to. When it detonates, it sends out a little ping on the radar. Now, this ping would happen like maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times, very big increments apart, so you would not have a consistent, knowledge of where these people are. But if an enemy gets hit by this, they will pop up on the radar. Now, the radius of this particular grenade is visible on the ground, and it is fairly small. We're not talking about a massive radius. It's generally just used to see if there's anyone camping around the corner waiting for you with like a shotgun, or maybe if you're chasing somebody that they're not baiting you into somebody with a shotgun or baiting you into a 2v1 situation. I don't think this has a very good competitive implementation if it was to be implemented competitively, but I think I could definitely see it in casual gameplay. It's not very, overly overpowered or anything like that. And it doesn't really affect the outcome of how the battle is going to turn out. Maybe it just affects whether that person decides to engage or not. So it doesn't really affect how the battle turns out, really, more so of just kind of increasing your awareness. Now this, again, you would only have one grenade unless you chose to have a perk that would, give you 2 of them. Again, very small radius, once, twice, maybe 3 times of a ping over the course of maybe 10-15 seconds. The ping itself is visible on the ground, the radius is visible on the ground, so you could see if you're not in that radius already, do not step in that radius or they're going to know you're there. Again, radar's already going to be there for casuals, but this is more for like if someone's crouching around a corner, maybe someone's baiting you into a 2v1, those kind of situations. Maybe there's a bunch of people camping in a room waiting for you. Those are the situations I'm talking about. So a very low implementation, or low power grenade in terms of its, as a non-lethal grenade. It's not very powerful. That's kind of what I was aiming for. Non-lethal grenades that assist you, not that are crazy because they're non-lethal grenades, they make them super overpowered. Just things that kind of assist you a little bit, maybe in terms of just a better awareness of the map. So moving on from this one is going to be the shock grenade. Okay, this grenade does not bounce. And it does not, again, it's very small radius on the ground when it pops. It's detonation on impact. Now, if it does detonate on a person, it drops their shield completely. So if you directly impact, just like with a sticky, it drops their shields completely. However, this best used on the ground, is in my theory, best used on the ground so the radius can actually go full, because if you hit a wall, it's not really going to affect anybody unless they touch it, because it doesn't go up or anything, just radiates out. Anyone that steps in it, if you jump, it stops happening to you, but if anyone that's walking in it will have a slow shield range, just a very slow shield range, maybe like 1/4 of a shield every 1.5 to 2 seconds, so it'll take about 10 seconds for your shields to drain completely. And I definitely could see this having more of an argument towards using as competitive, because it could be used as a deterrent, to maybe cut off an area from enemies. Now, this is kind of the same idea as like a Molotov grenade in Counter-Strike, where you throw the Molotov down and the enemy has 2 choices. You could either walk through the Molotov, take the damage, something that is much more prevalent in Counter-Strike, because with Halo you can just regenerate your shield, so not too big of a hindrance in Halo, which is why I think it would be a good implementation. Or you could wait for it to extinguish. That takes about 15 seconds. That's a big chunk of time when you think the round is only like, 2 minutes? So that's a huge chunk of time. Do you take the damage or do you wait? Again, those 2 scenarios are minimalized in Halo, because again, you have shields, you can regenerate your shields, you're not taking permanent health damage, and there's no real, crazy, you need to get there on time, nothing like that. So there's no real scenario like that unless you're playing something like Extraction, which is where I think it could be used very effectively to cut off areas of the map, or at least, make it so that if they decide to go through that area, again, if you jump off of it, it stops happening. It's only when you're touching the ground. But if you throw it, they will come out weak. Whenever they engage you, they're going to be weak because of the fact that you threw the grenade and they decided to walk through it rather than wait for it to extinguish. Now, the only reason I think this has a competitive implementation is for scenarios like that, for extraction, maybe CTF or something like that, objective game types. I really don't see this working too well in Slayer unless a bunch of people are just packed in a really tight corner, which doesn't really happen too often. But I do see this grenade kind of... I could see it being implemented competitive, but I see more of it in casual gameplay. I don't think it's overly, completely overpowered because of the fact that it's a very slow shield drain, because of the fact that you can regain your shields. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is if you don't have shields at all, or if your shields are completely depleted by this weapon, it does absolutely no damage to your health. So there's 0 damage to health. You never take any damage at all to your health. If you have no shields and you're trying to escape and you happen to run through this grenade, it does absolutely nothing to you. It's simply to be worked against as shields or something like that. So it's not meant to be, something that's crazy. Also could probably damage vehicles a little bit because I guess it is electric. So anyway, just a random different implementation of a grenade similar to Power Drain. But Power Drain, I believe, could kill you if you stood in it long enough. So that's essentially what I'm talking about. And the Promethean grenade was kind of like a mist kind of thing, and like it would like suck in from a radius. This is only on the ground, so very, not as overpowered. Promethean grenades were very, very powerful in terms of how much damage they took from you, and when they initially popped, they could really do a lot of damage to you. Where this is just a radius on the ground. If you jump off of it, or if you step out of that radius at any time, it stops happening. But while you're in it, while you're touching it, it's going to hurt you, okay? Only on the ground. Doesn't radiate up or out or anything like that. Just in that radius on the ground. So that's why I think it's a solid implementation on a non-lethal grenade, because there's enough restrictions on it to the point where it's not that crazy. So anyway, moving on to the next thing is kind of like a sticky grenade, but not really. More of like I don't want to say plasma grenade. I don't really have a name for this grenade. More so its ability. So when you throw it, I don't know what would happen if you direct impact somebody with it, but this grenade as well is detonation on impact. So again, best used on the floor. Essentially, when it hits the floor or hits the surface, it's going to emit some sort of residue or liquid that if anyone walks in it, or walks through it, it's going to impair their movement slightly. Not crazy, not like you can't move, or if you guys have ever played Call of Duty where you get flashed and you're like, you just can't move at all when you're flashed, or I'm sorry, stunned. That is a very severe impairment to movement, on top of visual impairment as well with stun grenades. But you get hit with it, and your movement goes from 100% to about 20%. Very, very, very significant movement reduction. I'm not talking about that at all. I may be talking about 100% to maybe 75 or 80% or something like that. Just enough to slow their strafing a little bit to make it a bit harder for them to dodge bullets. And again, the radius that it pops and the liquid that disperses on the ground is in a very small radius, not very big at all. Of course, it can be popped on a wall, but that's not as effective because they have to touch the wall for it to actually work. So that's essentially what I'm talking about. I don't think this has a very good implementation at all. As a matter of fact, out of all the grenades that I've talked about so far, this has probably the least strongest argument. Okay, the least strongest argument as a competitive implementation for a non-lethal grenade. Not very good, but it can be used in casual gameplay. I definitely could see it. I don't think it would be too annoying, and it could be all of these grenades really. This is the whole idea behind it, is all these grenades, even if they're not used in competitive or they're not used in casual gameplay, they're still in there for game types on maybe custom games you want to use. If you want to play with your friends a non-lethal grenade custom game, or maybe you want to maybe someone might develop a very creative way to use these non-lethal grenades. Something that's very interesting, and the reason that I haven't brought up any common non-lethal grenades like smoke grenades or flash grenades, first of all, I think flash grenades would be very, very annoying. I don't think people would like that very much. It depends on the implementation, it really does, but I think that flash grenades are not the way to go, unless maybe you can dodge them or look away or something like that. I'm not sure, but I know for a fact that flash grenades, above all else, would be very annoying to people. Smoke grenades, on the other hand, I think would be very cool to have in Halo, but I tried to think out of the box here and bring to you guys a little bit of a different implementation to non-lethals than what people commonly think of as non-lethal grenades. But if smoke grenades were in Halo 5, that would be a very good implementation. Visual impairment is always a very good competitive implementation. It's been used in Call of Duty. It's been used in Counter-Strike. It's probably more so used in Counter-Strike than Call of Duty, but recently Call of Duty has been really using smoke grenades, and I think the smoke grenades would play a good role, especially in competitive, but casual as well. Visual impairment is a great non-lethal grenade. Really, really is, because and I'm not talking about flash grenades, I'm talking about smoke grenades or whatever, simply because it does no damage to people. It's simply a tactical decision. That's all it is. Tactical decision. Do you push through the smoke? Do you, are you maybe scoping a sight line with a sniper, pops the smoke? Wow, you can't see anyone anymore. People have free reign to go across. Those are the things I'm talking about. Again, these would take place of lethal grenades, but they might, unless you have a perk. Again, if you have a perk, maybe you can add it. But they might be, it might be worth it, depending on what you're doing, depending on your strategy, the map, the team you're playing, whatever it may be, team you're playing with. All those things matter. And this is why I think that these things have competitive implementation. Smoke above all else, because I mean, smoke is just a classic thing to use for competitive. But the shot grenade I could see being used competitive as a deterrent. I don't really see the radar grenade being used in competitive, but I suppose it does have a potential argument for competitive. The sticky grenade or that little residue grenade or whatever I would decide to call it, or whatever it would be named. Probably does not have a competitive implementation, but those two would work good casually, especially the radar grenade would be used good casually, and then that shot grenade would be used quite well, I think. I think that would be very good, and there's a strong argument there for competitive implementations. Now, if you guys have any particular ideas that you thought of when you were watching this video, or maybe you've thought about this in the past, does Halo have the potential to use non-lethal grenades and things like that? Let me know. Again, I'll make another video describing some of the weaknesses that these grenades might have. I'll just kind of elaborate on them a little bit right now. Essentially, what it would be like, with the radar grenade, you could have an ability that you don't show up when that thing pings or something like that. With the shot grenade, maybe your shield's drained slower than someone who doesn't have that ability on. With the residue grenade, right? Maybe you're not affected by that at all with your movement speed, because maybe your boots or your treading prevent that. Like, that would be a perk you could equip. Like the boots that you equipped, or that whatever the bottom treading is on the bottom of the boot, might prevent you from actually being affected by that movement grenade. So those are things I'm talking about. They all have counters, and in and of themselves, they're not very powerful. They're very, very light uses of non-lethal grenades. Now, of course, regular lethal grenades are always going to have a place in competitive, but again, it might be interesting to see. Maybe you might want to swap out your lethal grenade or use a perk to add a non-lethal grenade, just because of the moment or the scenario that you're currently in. It might benefit you depending on the map, depending on the game type. It really just depends. Its versatility is what I was kind of after here, and kind of adding to that versatility. So, alright guys, and with that being said, like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you'd like to become a Sage in training today, and as always, this has been Mr. Bazy, your favorite Sage, and I'll see you in the next video.